The morning sun gleamed off the polished cars at Elite Motors as Harold Washington adjusted his favorite baseball cap. At 75, he still had that spark in his eyes, the same one that had guided him through decades of smart business decisions. Today, he wanted to treat himself to something special, a new luxury car to celebrate his grandson's college graduation. The showroom's glass doors opened smoothly, letting in a rush of cool air. Harold smiled, taking in the sight of the pristine vehicles. The new model he'd researched online sat in the center, its silver paint catching the light just right. He'd been saving the article about it on his phone for weeks. 3 salespeople stood chatting by the front desk. Despite the empty showroom, none moved to help him. Harold walked closer, his shoes clicking on the marble floor. Still nothing. He cleared his throat politely, but they just glanced his way and continued their conversation about weekend plans. "Excuse me," Harold finally said, his voice carrying the warmth and confidence of a man who'd spent his life in boardrooms. "I'm interested in that silver model there." One of the salespeople looked him up and down, taking in his comfortable jeans, old baseball cap, and worn sneakers. Harold had never believed in flashy clothes. His father had taught him that true worth came from actions, not appearances. Before anyone could respond, a man in an expensive suit walked out of the back office. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone making it clear that he thought Harold was the problem. "No problem at all," Harold replied calmly. "I'd like to look at that new model you have on display." The man, his nameplate read Sales Manager, stepped between Harold and the car. "Sir, I don't think this is the right place for you. Perhaps try the used car lot down the street?" Harold's heart sank, not for himself, but for how little progress had been made. He'd faced this kind of treatment before, back in the 60s. To still see it in today's world, especially toward a potential customer who could easily afford any car in the showroom. "I can assure you, I'm quite capable of making a purchase," Harold said, reaching for his wallet to show his platinum credit card. "Security," the manager called out, loud enough to make other customers turn and stare. "Please escort this gentleman out. We reserve the right to refuse service." As the security guard approached, Harold stood tall, dignity intact. He could have made a scene, could have pulled out his bank statements, or called his lawyer right there. Instead, he smiled, the kind of smile that came from knowing something others didn't. "Thank you for your time," he said, turning to leave. "You'll be seeing me again very soon." Walking to his 10-year-old car in the parking lot, Harold pulled out his phone. He had some calls to make, to his investment manager, his lawyer, and a few old friends in the automotive industry. What these people saw today was an old man in casual clothes. What they'd see tomorrow would be very different. After all, Harold hadn't built his fortune by letting others define him. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the best response to prejudice wasn't anger, it was excellence. And he was about to give Elite Motors a lesson they'd never forget. Life hadn't always been about investment portfolios and business meetings for Harold Washington. Back in 1948, he was just a young boy running through cotton fields, helping his father under the hot sun. Their small wooden house in Georgia barely kept out the rain, but it was filled with more wisdom than many universities. "Son," his father would say, wiping sweat from his brow, "they can take away a lot of things, but they can't take what's in here." He'd tap his temple and then his heart. "Learn everything you can, save every penny you earn, and remember, your dignity isn't for sale at any price." Harold took those words to heart. After school, while other kids played, he'd help at the local mechanic's shop, fascinated by engines and business operations alike. The owner, Mr. Thompson, noticed his curiosity and started teaching him about both cars and money management. By 16, Harold had saved enough from odd jobs to buy his first car, a beaten-up Ford that barely ran. He fixed it up and sold it for double the price. That was his first taste of business success, and it lit a fire that would never go out. College wasn't easy to come by for someone from his background, but Harold studied harder than anyone else. He worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, and graduated top of his class in business administration. His classmates bought new cars with their first paychecks. Harold invested in stocks. The corporate world of the 1970s wasn't kind to someone who looked like him. He'd walk into meetings and be mistaken for the janitor. But Harold had learned from his father, dignity came from within. He let his work speak for itself, building a reputation as the consultant who could turn failing businesses around. His first big break came when a small tech company needed restructuring help. Instead of taking his full fee, he negotiated for stock options. That company later became one of the biggest names in Silicon Valley. Harold repeated this strategy, quietly building his empire while living in the same modest house, driving the same reliable car. By his 40s, Harold was worth millions, but you'd never know it. He remembered watching his father count pennies at the kitchen table, making sure they had enough for seeds next season. That lesson in humility stayed with him. While others flaunted their wealth, Harold focused on making smart investments and helping others. He started a small foundation for underprivileged students, remembering his own struggles. He mentored young entrepreneurs, sharing the wisdom his father and Mr. Thompson had passed down. His philosophy was simple: true wealth wasn't about what you had, but what you could give back. Now at 75, Harold was worth over $50 million, though most people would never guess it. He still clipped coupons, still wore his favorite old cap, and still remembered every lesson from those cotton fields. His father hadn't lived to see his success, but Harold knew he would have been proud, not of the money, but of the man he'd become. Walking out of Elite Motors that morning, Harold felt a familiar fire in his belly. The same determination that had driven him all these years was still there. He'd faced discrimination before, but now he had the power to turn it into a teaching moment. Not with anger or revenge, but with the quiet dignity his father had taught him so many years ago. Opening his phone's contact list, Harold smiled. He had a plan forming, and it would change more than just a car dealership. It would show that sometimes the best lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. The evening sun cast long shadows through Harold's home office as he sat in his old leather chair, the one he bought at a garage sale 20 years ago. His laptop was open, showing dozens of tabs about Elite Motors' parent company. The incident at the dealership still weighed on his mind, but now it was mixed with something else: opportunity. His first call was to Robert, his investment manager of 30 years. "Remember that automotive group we discussed last month?" Harold asked, his voice calm but determined. "The one that's been struggling with their finances. I want everything you can find about their current situation." While waiting for Robert's research, Harold sipped his evening tea from his grandson's handmade mug, thinking about how different things could have been. If he'd walked into that showroom wearing an expensive suit, flashing his wealth, but that wasn't who he was. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Money talks, son, but wisdom whispers." His phone buzzed. Robert's email revealed exactly what Harold suspected. Elite Motors' parent company was in deeper trouble than the public knew. Their stock had been quietly dropping, and rumors of a potential sale were circulating among industry insiders. Next, he called his lawyer, Chen, who'd helped him structure dozens of business deals. "I need to know if buying a controlling stake is possible," Harold explained, his fingers drumming thoughtfully on his desk. "And I need it done quietly." As Chen worked his magic, Harold pulled up the company's public records. Years of overexpansion had left them vulnerable. Their showrooms were profitable, but poor management at the top had created a mountain of debt. It was a situation Harold had seen countless times as a consultant: too much flash, not enough substance. His grandson's photo on the desk caught his eye. The boy was graduating next week, entering a world that still judged people by their appearance. Harold had always taught him that change doesn't come from complaining about darkness, but from lighting candles. Maybe it was time to light a big one. Around midnight, Chen called back. "It's possible," he said, excitement in his voice. "They're actually looking for buyers. Most of their shareholders are worried about the company's direction. With your reputation and liquid assets, we could structure a deal by morning." Harold leaned back in his chair, memories flooding in. He remembered being turned away from car dealerships in his younger days, being told to try somewhere more suitable. He thought about all the others who'd faced the same treatment, but didn't have the means to fight back. "Make it happen," Harold said firmly. "But with two conditions. First, no one knows about this until it's done. Second, we keep the current staff. They're about to get an education they never expected." Over the next few hours, as the city slept, Harold's team worked tirelessly. Numbers were crunched, documents were prepared, and deals were structured. By 3 a.m., everything was in place. Harold would own not just the showroom that dismissed him, but the entire regional network of dealerships. As he finally headed to bed, Harold stopped by his closet. Inside, past the designer suits he rarely wore, he found his comfortable jeans and that old baseball cap. Tomorrow, he'd wear them again. Sometimes the best lessons come wrapped in unexpected packages. Setting his alarm, Harold smiled. Tomorrow would be interesting, not just for him, but for everyone at Elite Motors. They were about to learn that true value isn't found in appearances and that dignity comes in all forms. It would be a lesson they'd never forget, delivered in a way they'd never expect. Dawn broke over the city as Harold's lawyer, Chen, walked into the corporate headquarters of Elite Motors' parent company. The early morning security guard barely glanced at his credentials, not realizing he was about to witness one of the biggest ownership transfers in the company's history. Harold sat in his home study, watching his phone as updates came in. His investment team had worked through the night, preparing everything. The company's board members, desperate for a solution to their financial troubles, had jumped at the offer. They didn't know who the buyer was yet, just that someone with deep pockets was interested. "The paperwork's ready," Chen texted. Harold took a deep breath and looked at the family photo on his desk. 3 generations of Washingtons, all smiling at his grandson's last birthday. His father had taught him that patience and timing were everything. Now, 40 years of smart investments were about to pay off in an unexpected way. The first signatures came through on his tablet around 8 a.m. Board members, eager to salvage their investments, signed digitally from across the country. Each notification brought Harold closer to ownership. He thought about the showroom staff, going about their morning routine, not knowing their world was about to change. His phone rang. It was his old friend Thomas, who ran one of the biggest banks in the state. "Harold, are you sure about this? That's a lot of money to spend on teaching someone a lesson." Harold chuckled softly. "It's not about the lesson, Thomas. It's about creating change. Sometimes you have to be the change you want to see." By 9 a.m., the deal was almost done. Harold had committed $25 million, half his net worth, to buy controlling interest in the company. Some might call it crazy, but Harold called it investment in humanity. The dealerships were solid businesses. They just needed better leadership. His grandson called next. "Grandpa, Mom told me what happened yesterday. Are you okay?" "Never better," Harold replied, smiling. "Just doing what you always say, disrupting the system from within." The final signatures came through at 9:45 a.m. Harold Washington was now the majority owner of not just one showroom, but 30 dealerships across 3 states. Chen sent a simple message: "It's done. You're the boss." Harold stood up and walked to his closet. He passed by his collection of expensive suits, the ones he bought for board meetings but rarely wore. Instead, he pulled out the same comfortable jeans and baseball cap from yesterday. His father's words rang in his ears. "True power isn't about what you wear, it's about what you do with it." He made himself a simple breakfast, toast and coffee, just like any other day. The only difference was that today, he owned one of the largest luxury car dealership networks in the region. The staff at Elite Motors wouldn't know until he walked in. That was the beauty of it. As he drove to the showroom in his 10-year-old car, Harold thought about all the people who'd been judged by their appearance over the years. Today wasn't just about him. It was about every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong somewhere. The ownership papers sat in his old leather briefcase, the one his late wife had given him when he started his consulting business. She would have loved this moment. Sometimes, she used to say, the best answer to disrespect is success. Harold parked in the same spot as yesterday, right in front of the showroom. In a few minutes, he would walk through those doors again. But this time, everything would be different. Not because he was now the owner, but because he was about to show them what true leadership looked like. The morning sun reflected off Elite Motors' showroom windows as Harold walked through the entrance for the second time in 2 days. The same 3 salespeople stood chatting by the desk, just like yesterday. They gave him the same dismissive glance, quickly turning back to their conversation. Harold smiled to himself, taking a moment to admire the cars. They were beautiful machines, and now, technically, they were all his. His lawyer Chen would arrive in exactly 5 minutes with the paperwork, but Harold wanted these few moments alone with the staff who judged him so quickly. The sales manager emerged from his office, his face darkening when he spotted Harold. "Sir, I believe we made ourselves clear yesterday," he said, walking briskly toward him. "Please don't make this difficult." Harold kept his calm, just as he had during countless business negotiations over the years. "Actually, I think you're the one who might find this morning difficult," he said quietly. The manager reached for his phone, presumably to call security again. That's when the showroom's doors opened, and Chen walked in, carrying a leather briefcase. Behind him came two members of the company's board of directors, their faces serious. Mr. Thompson, one of the board members, addressed the sales manager. "We need everyone's attention, please." The salespeople finally stopped chatting, curiosity drawing them closer. A small crowd was forming, mechanics from the service department, office staff, everyone within earshot. Harold stood quietly, his father's lessons about dignity playing in his mind. "Ladies and gentlemen," the board member continued, "I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Harold Washington, the new majority owner of not just Elite Motors, but our entire regional dealership network." The silence that followed was deafening. The sales manager's phone slipped from his hand, clattering on the marble floor. One of the salespeople actually sat down on a nearby chair, legs weak. Chen stepped forward, opening his briefcase. "Here are the ownership papers, officially filed this morning. Mr. Washington now owns controlling interest in all 30 dealerships across 3 states. Harold finally spoke, his voice calm and clear. "Thank you, Chen." He turned to face the staff, seeing shock, embarrassment, and fear on their faces. "Yesterday, I came in looking to buy a car. Today, I own the company. But what matters isn't how much money I have or what I own, it's how we treat each other." The sales manager started to stammer an apology, but Harold held up his hand. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to make changes, real changes." He looked around the showroom, meeting each person's eyes. "Starting today, we're going to do things differently." He walked over to the car he'd been interested in yesterday. "This is a beautiful machine. But the true value of any business isn't in its products, it's in its people. All people, regardless of how they look or what they wear." Harold pulled his old baseball cap lower over his eyes, a gesture of humility rather than shame. "I could fire everyone who treated me poorly yesterday. But that wouldn't solve anything. Instead, we're going to learn from this moment." The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the showroom floor. In that light, Harold Washington stood tall, not as a wealthy man looking for revenge, but as someone determined to turn a moment of discrimination into an opportunity for growth. "Now," he said, a small smile playing on his lips, "who wants to show me around my new showroom? And this time, maybe we can all leave our assumptions at the door." The changes at Elite Motors started small but grew quickly. Harold sat in his new office, watching through the window as a young mechanic taught a group of high school students about engine maintenance. This was just one of many programs he'd started in the months since taking over. Instead of firing anyone, Harold had turned the showroom into a learning ground. The same sales manager who tried to throw him out now sat through weekly training sessions, learning about unconscious bias and the value of treating everyone with respect. "You see those kids out there?" Harold asked during a staff meeting. "That's our future. Some of them might not look like your typical luxury car buyers today, but success comes in all shapes and sizes." He spoke from experience, remembering his own journey from cotton fields to corporate boardrooms. The diversity training wasn't just about race, it covered age, appearance, gender, everything that might make someone prejudge a customer. Harold brought in experts, but the most powerful lessons came from real people sharing real stories. One day, an elderly woman in gardening clothes walked in, dirt still on her hands. Before Harold's changes, she might have been ignored. Instead, a salesperson, the same one who'd dismissed Harold, greeted her warmly. Turned out she owned one of the largest landscaping companies in the state and bought 3 luxury cars that day. Harold started a mentorship program, partnering with local high schools. Students who never thought they could work in the automotive industry got hands-on experience. The dealership's mechanics taught them about cars, while the sales team showed them the business side. "My grandfather believed in me when nobody else did," Harold told his staff. "Sometimes that's all someone needs, a chance to prove themselves." He set up a scholarship fund, helping promising students pursue careers in automotive technology or business management. The showroom's atmosphere changed. Gone was the stuffy, intimidating vibe. Now, there was a coffee station where customers could relax, walls showcased local artists' work, and every Saturday they hosted community events in the parking lot. Harold's favorite addition was the Future Innovators program. Once a month, young entrepreneurs could present their ideas to a panel of successful business owners. The best part: the presentations happened right in the showroom, surrounded by luxury cars, a reminder that dreams were achievable. The sales manager, who'd initially been the most resistant to change, gradually became one of Harold's strongest supporters. "I've been in this business 30 years," he admitted during a staff meeting, "and I've never seen it done better." Even the physical space transformed. Harold added a small library of business and automotive books, free for anyone to read. The waiting area became a mini museum, displaying the history of automobiles alongside stories of diverse innovators who'd shaped the industry. But perhaps the most significant change was in the staff themselves. They started seeing people, not stereotypes. The same salespeople who once ignored customers in casual clothes now treated everyone like a potential friend, not just a potential sale. "Success isn't just about making money," Harold often said, straightening his old baseball cap. "It's about making a difference." He kept his office door open, welcoming anyone who wanted to talk, from the newest intern to the most experienced mechanic. One afternoon, Harold overheard a salesperson telling a young customer, "Don't judge a book by its cover. Our owner taught us that." He smiled, knowing that sometimes the best way to fight prejudice wasn't with anger, but with wisdom and opportunity. 1 year after Harold Washington walked into Elite Motors in his baseball cap, the dealership had become something nobody expected. Sales were up 40%, but that wasn't the real success story. The true victory was in the lives changed and lessons learned. The showroom buzzed with energy as Harold watched a local news crew set up their cameras. They were doing a story about the dealership's transformation, but Harold hadn't planned to be interviewed. He preferred letting the results speak for themselves. "Your grandfather's a hero," a young apprentice mechanic told Harold's grandson, who was now working part-time at the dealership while attending college. "He showed us that success isn't about looking rich, it's about treating people right." The sales manager, who'd once tried to throw Harold out, now led the dealership's community outreach program. He spoke at business conferences about the importance of looking past appearances. "I was wrong," he'd say, "and that mistake taught me the most valuable lesson of my career." Elite Motors had become known as the dealership where everyone felt welcome. Customers would drive from other states just to experience the atmosphere. A construction worker in muddy boots could walk in and receive the same respect as a business executive in an expensive suit. The scholarship program had already sent 15 students to college. The walls of Harold's office were covered with their photos and thank you letters. "You believed in me when nobody else would," one letter read. "Now I'm starting my own business, and I'll never forget what you taught us about judging people." Harold's story had gone viral months ago, inspiring other businesses to examine their practices. But he wasn't interested in fame. He still wore his comfortable clothes, drove his old car, and treated everyone with the same respect he'd wanted that first day. During a staff meeting, one of the original salespeople spoke up. "You know what's amazing?" she said. "Our profits are higher than ever, but that's not why we come to work excited every day. We come because this place shows what business should be about, giving everyone a fair chance." The dealership's waiting area had become a mini museum of success stories. Photos showed graduates of their training program, young entrepreneurs who'd presented their ideas, and community events that had brought people together. Each picture told a story of transformation. On quiet evenings, Harold would walk through the showroom, remembering that first day. The same security guard who'd been called to escort him out now greeted him with a warm smile. "Never judge a book by its cover," the guard would say to new employees during orientation. "That's the first rule here at Elite Motors." Harold's father's old wisdom had proven true once again. Money talks, but wisdom whispers. The changes at Elite Motors weren't just about selling cars anymore. They were about changing hearts and minds, one person at a time. As Harold adjusted his baseball cap and watched another diverse group of students arrive for their mentorship program, he smiled. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's showing people a better way forward. Elite Motors had become more than a dealership. It was a blueprint for how businesses could look past appearances and find success by embracing everyone. "Ready for your interview, Mr. Washington?" the news reporter asked. Harold shook his head softly. "No need," he replied. "Just talk to my people. They're the real story here." He walked toward his office, passing the spot where he'd been asked to leave a year ago. Now it held a simple plaque that read, "Welcome everyone, your dreams matter here."